Alrighty, cherubs. So today we're going to go ahead and get started with the High Italian Renaissance. We're going to move into the Cinquecento, the 1500s, and dive right into that High Italian Renaissance. So what you need to know, what we talked about 2 times ago, was the early Italian Renaissance begins in Florence and is in the 1400s. And that style is developed by Giotto, Brunelleschi, among others, Botticelli, etc. They're going to be using that egg tempera, and they're going to be trying to recreate observable reality by using such things as linear perspective to recreate their world. We're going to be seeing the first nudes that we've seen in 1,000 years. And they're going to be heavily patronized by the families of Florence, by the Medici, by the Pazzi, and by others, the Rucellai family, and by other wealthy families there within Florence. As we change centuries, as we get into the 1500s, the Renaissance is going to, the center of the Renaissance, the center of art production is going to shift from Florence to Rome. And the reason why that's going to happen is because the Medici are actually going to get kicked out of Florence. Okay, they're going to run afoul of the church with for various reasons, and they're going to get kicked out of Florence. So the patronage is going to shift to Rome because there's the next biggest center of people with money. And the most people with money now are within the Catholic Church itself. Okay, so that's why it's going to shift from Florence to Rome here in the 1500s. And our style here is going to be pioneered by Leonardo. It is going to be idealized rather than observably real. They're still going to play with the observational reality, but they're going to make their figures superhuman. Okay, they're going to make them idealized and beautiful. We're also going to be using oils rather than egg temperas, and that's super important. And they're going to have this very sculpted, very beautiful look. Okay. So our pieces for today, we're going to be splitting the High Renaissance into 2 parts. We're going to be talking about the Romans first, and then about Venice and a later branch of the Renaissance, which is Mannerism. All right. So to become an artist during the Renaissance, what you're going to have to do is get attached to a master, and you're going to have to apprentice with him for many years. And that means you work in the studio and you just kind of see how it all happens, how it all goes down. You have to be able to make paint, run errands, make the coffee, so to speak. And then you're going to start painting very, very small things. So your master gets a commission. You might be assigned to paint the trees in the background. Okay. Whereas more important or more advanced students are going to be able to paint other figures, whereas the master is going to paint the faces of the most important figures, okay, or the main figures themselves. And then you progress up that ladder. And so that's what happens with Leonardo da Vinci, okay? He is apprenticed to an artist, Andrea Verrocchio, at a young age, and learns how to create from him. I'm going to link this clip up. Actually, I'll put the link down in the description below. I do want you to watch this. This is going to talk to you about Leonardo and how he is, his apprenticeship, okay? And kind of the effects of his apprenticeship and how he brought oil paint and started to use oil paint instead of egg temperas, and the effect that had on his apprenticeship. Now, Mona Lisa, we've talked about her in the past, but what you need to know about Mona Lisa is there's a couple of things that are highlighted here within this piece that are important to note. First of all, we get this nice triangle composition, okay? And that is very Renaissance. All right. That great triangle composition, that pyramid composition, that equilateral triangle, because it's about, remember, it's intellectual, it's not emotional. So they're going to have this gorgeous, restful, symmetrical, balanced compositions. We're going to see that again and again. He's also going to be using sfumato. Now, sfumato means smoky in Italian. And you can see the use of the sfumato, especially in the corners of the eyes, the corners of the mouth, in the neck area, the hands, where we're getting this great like kind of smokiness. What Leonardo is going to use oil paint like people paint today with watercolors. Very, very, very thin. And this is how they did it up north too, if you recall. Very thin, micro thin layers of paint, and they let it dry in between each layer. And you add just this very, very tiny, thin layer on. Get rid of myself there. To each piece. Okay. And you build up the layers in that way. That way you can't ever see kind of where the edges are. And that's what gives you this really gorgeous effect. Okay, that's the smokiness. The other technique that he's going to use, and this is what you need to know, is the chiaroscuro, which means light, dark, light, dark. Okay, and that's the shading, the modeling, the very real modeling. Now, if we think back to Giotto, there was modeling happening. Now with Leonardo, it is utterly convincing. Okay, that modeling, that shading is completely convincing here. So he takes it to the next level. Giotto introduces modeling. Leonardo da Vinci perfects it with chiaroscuro. Okay. So again, it uses that light shadow. And sfumato uses the glazing of the oil paint to create that smokiness, that so you can't really see where the edges are. All right. Da Vinci was working alongside a student. A student was working alongside of Da Vinci, rather, and painting the Mona Lisa, La Gioconda at the same time. And they just recently found this here in the 21st century. And she has not been exposed to the elements quite like the original has. So the piece that we're going to look at, the piece that we're going to talk about today here in Italy, is the Last Supper. Okay? And the Last Supper is one of these pieces that, again, has entered into the canon of Western art. That is one of the hallmarks of Western painting. I'm going to go ahead and click this here. And hopefully we can get a higher resolution image. Oh, no. Okay. What's going to happen in this picture is that he's going to use math to create this perfect image. Okay. We've got the focal point of Jesus right down here in the center, and everything guides our eye to him. All the orthogonal lines converge, the vanishing point, the horizon line, the vanishing point, it's all right here in Jesus's head. So he brings us, and everything points directly to that. Okay. He has 12 apostles, and he's grouped them by three. So there's 4 groups of 3, and they're all reacting. This is the moment when Christ says, "One of you will betray me." And he wanted to capture those reactions. And so what he would do is when he wanted his people to look real, and so he would go out into the streets of Milan and just study people and sketch them for days and days and days to try and find the best faces to use in this. So what this is, he is commissioned by the Duke of Milan to create this painting in the dining area of a monastery. Okay. So while the monks are down below eating, they're looking up at this, the Last Supper of Christ. Okay. And so it's painted as an extension of the room. So it's made to make the room look bigger by using that 1-point perspective, the coffered ceiling. He's using a bit of numerology here. So we've got the panels on the walls. There's 4 panels on each wall for the gospel writers. We get 3 openings, 2 windows, and a doorway in the back for the Holy Trinity. And when you multiply 3 by 4, you get 12, right? And he's divided, again, those 12 apostles into 4 groups of 3. So it's reflected again and again, okay? They're using their implied lines. The faces, the gestures are again pointing to Christ and looking at him as he has just announced that one will betray him. Okay, now Christ is also enlarged slightly. He's a little bit bigger than the other figures again, so that he becomes the focal point. He is this great pyramidal composition, and again, this great symmetrical composition. So it has this really nice balance to it. Now, DaVinci, in the creation of this painting, is going to, it is a fresco, but it's a dry fresco. So he wants to paint a dry fresco as opposed to a true fresco, a bone fresco, because a fresco secco, it's called a dry fresco, because he wants to be able to take his time to create these pieces and to create this painting. And it takes him multiple years to do this. The problem is that ever the scientist, he tries to mix these techniques. He tries to mix oils and temperas, which doesn't really work because it's literally mixing oil and water. And so it starts to flake off almost immediately. So it's been restored. And by restored, I mean repainted many, many, many times throughout the years. In the late 20th century, early 21st century, it was undergoing a restoration to try and remove all of these other paint layers. So they painstakingly, flake by flake, piece by piece, tried to remove these other layers to get down to Da Vinci's original picture. And this is what remains. So this poor picture has suffered a lot through the years. It is highly damaged. There was a moment when they wanted the doorway to be bigger. So that's what this actually is this was painted in by Da Vinci, but then later on what's going to happen is they want the doorway. There's a door below the painting. They wanted it bigger, the monks did. And so they enlarged it and cut off Jesus's feet. So that's what this piece is. And now during World War II, and we'll watch a clip about this in a minute, is what happened was the site was bombed during World War II. And the other 3 walls of this room were blown apart. So the picture was actually on the one wall that survived, and miraculously, and didn't get blown to pieces. But then it was exposed to the elements for a long time while the monastery gets rebuilt. So this poor picture has suffered intensely. But he's using this mathematical precision, and he's going to use guide ropes to create the orthogonal lines. He's going to use real human beings. Now, the story goes is that the abbot of the monastery was upset because Da Vinci was taking his time, because Da Vinci's always getting distracted by, a butterfly flies past and he must study it. Okay, so he gets distracted, and it takes him years to be able to paint this picture. And so the abbot complains to the Duke of Milan and says, look, this guy's taking too long. We just want this done. So the Duke calls in Da Vinci and says, hey, what's going on? I'm paying for this. Like, let's chop, make it happen. And Da Vinci's like, look, if you don't want me to paint you, the abbot, as Judas Iscariot, the betrayer of Jesus, if you don't want me to give Judas your face, leave me alone. And then the abbot backs down. It's like, oh, okay, sorry. That's the story. Whether that actually happened is apocryphal, but that's the story. But this is Da Vinci's Last Supper. Okay. So here are our players. Oh, there's a high resolution image. You can see here, again, the picture that it gives us. Now, remember back to when we talked about the Etruscans, how they would have been sitting on triclinia. And Da Vinci clearly does not picture this on triclinia. It is not historically accurate, but it's a great picture. Okay. So here we go. Here are the players that get identified later. Notice that Jesus is without a halo, and he goes without a halo because the window behind him acts as a halo, which is great. Okay, we're going to link this clip, which will walk you through the creation of the Last Supper. And then this clip is, again, just a brief little, it's from the Monuments Men, but it shows kind of what happens to the picture when the monastery is blown apart. All right. So this is the picture of the Last Supper. This is the only Da Vinci piece that remains in situ. It's the only one that remains on site from where it was created. All right, that's Leonardo. Now we're moving on to Michelangelo. Michelangelo is famously not a nice human. Da Vinci is a guy that again, people like him. He's affable, he's charming, but he's also, again, very easily distracted, and he takes a long time on his commissions. Michelangelo, on the other hand, is someone who is pugnacious. He likes to get into fights. He is cranky. He's arrogant, and he thinks that he's the best because he is the best. He is remarkable in his skill level. And he's going to take, for example, his most famous statue. He considered himself a sculptor. And so he can do anything. Like all of these men can do anything. But he considered himself a sculptor. And that was his first love. When the Medici returned to Florence, they commission him to create the David. It's like we're back. Haha. And so they create this for to be outside. It's a 14-foot tall sculpture, and it was done with a damaged stone that it was called the Giant, ironically. This piece of marble that no one else could tackle because it had a giant crack running through the middle of it. And people didn't know. They're like, this is worthless. We can't use this giant slab of marble to carve. And Michelangelo's like, pshaw, I'll show you. And he does. And it creates the most, iconic sculpture here in Western art with this great contrapposto muscular David with these oversized hands and head. And the reason that he's oversized is he wants to give emphasis to those pieces, those segments, because this is going to be on a plinth that is very tall, and you have to crane your neck and look up at this thing. And so he wants to make sure that you see the hands and the head, because again, they're given prominence. He sculpts them too large purposefully so that they look correct when you're standing way below it. So again, this is a 14-foot tall statue. This great contrapposto out of marble. And that is Michelangelo's gift, is that, and he says that he's like, the sculpture's already there. I'm just going to clear away the stone. Okay, he creates the muscles and the tendons and the veins within the body. He's that good. I mean, he's that good. Now, the piece that, and he would be appalled that AP has picked for the piece that we're going to talk about, the piece that AP wants you to know, he would be appalled that they want you to know, because again, he's going to see himself as a sculptor, not as a painter. But AP wants us to talk about the Sistine Chapel. Now, here it is. Here's the Sistine Chapel. What the Sistine Chapel is, it's the private chapel for the popes. Okay. So again, it's not a giant basilica. It is a chapel that is meant for the prayers of the Pope. The Pope himself comes here to worship. And this is also the place where the cardinals meet when a Pope dies or resigns and they need to replace him. They come here and they meet here. And so the smoke from the chimney changes when they've chosen. I think it is black. It billows black if they have not chosen a new pope. And when they do, the smoke changes to white. And then that's their announcement to the world that, yes, we've come to a conclusion and we have picked a new pope. But you can just see that it's not this enormous building, but it's got this axial design. Okay, it's just this rectangular building with these buttresses around the exterior facade. All right. So again, it's the Pope's private chapel. It's going to be built in 1472, and it's going to be painted originally by Botticelli, Perugino, Ghirlandaio, as well as others, okay, who paint the inside. Now, originally, the ceiling is going to be painted like the Scrovegni Chapel. It's going to be painted blue with stars. But the Pope at the time is going to commission Michelangelo to paint over it because that's not good enough for him. Okay, we're going to link this in the description. So he's going to commission. So here we see other paintings by other artists. All right, here's what it looks like on the inside. What Michelangelo is famous for painting is the ceiling. And again, that ceiling was just painted like the Scrovegni Chapel, blue with stars. Julius II is going to be the Pope, and he and Michelangelo are going to have this very contentious relationship, a very, very fraught relationship, where Julius II is a warrior, and he's used to getting his own way. He leads the armies of the Vatican, the Papal States, to fight against their enemies in the other, in the Italian peninsula. And he's used to getting his way, and he's used to being obeyed. But then you get this headstrong artist who's like, no, I'm going to do it my own way. I have my own vision for how to do things. And so you have Michelangelo who's painting this ceiling then, again, under duress, because the Pope, Julius II, had already commissioned him to create this massive mausoleum for himself. So he wants Michelangelo to create this tomb for when he dies, for when Julius dies. And so that's what he wants to be working on. But then Julius keeps pulling him aside for these other side projects. And, but in the meantime, do this. He's like, I don't want to do this. I want to build your tomb. He's like, no. This is more important. Do this. And so he paints the Sistine Chapel, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. He has to construct this scaffolding that holds him 60 feet in the air on his back while he does this. It is true fresco, so he's got to plaster, then paint, okay, while he gets it, while the plaster is still wet. So you can only work in small sections at a time. And it takes him 5 years, which is remarkable. It's the size of a football field, but it takes him 5 years to create this. For perspective, the Mona Lisa is about 3 feet tall, and not even 3 feet tall, excuse me. It's much smaller than that. It's like 2 feet tall, and it took him the same amount of time. Michelangelo is going to be painting on the ceiling. What he paints are stories of the Old Testament. Okay, so you're getting stories from the Old Testament here in the corners and down the center. So it's the creation of the world, and then you've got various and sundry prophets, and that foretold the coming of Christ, as well as sibyls. Now, a sibyl is they're pagan. Okay, so they weren't from the Judeo-Christian tradition, but they were lady prophets, essentially, whose writings were seen to also prefigure the coming of Christ. So, for example, we've got the Delphic Sibyl, the Delphic Oracle here, the lady in Greece that people would go to have their fortunes or their futures foretold. Okay, alternating. So we get these ladies alternating with the prophets. Now you have the family of Christ down the side, all right, as well as the the ancestors, the ancestors of Christ running in the lunettes around the outside as well. So this is the Sistine Chapel. This is its layout. Now the creation of Adam is right here, and that's the most famous piece. So it goes from God creating or separating the light and the dark to the drunkenness of Noah. So he's going to actually start down at this end and work this way. So you can see the compositions are actually going to be getting more simple here in the middle as we scooch down this way. And this last one, he paints in a single day. Now, he also includes innumerable nudes, and he paints these sections in here that are like architectural pieces. So he creates these little nude statues as if they're pieces of architecture holding up the roof. Okay, and they're just paint. It's really remarkable. So we've got these great nude figures throughout, and these are called inudi. Okay, inudi. These nude figures placed throughout. All right. Now here's Julius II, and this is Zechariah. Zechariah, an Old Testament prophet. Here's Zechariah down here. This is Michelangelo having a bit of a joke at Julius's expense. So you walk in over here under Zechariah, you walk into the chapel and you look up and you just see this great story unfold. And what he's done is he's given Zechariah the prophet Julius II's face. And you see the little cherubs, the little figures behind the prophet here. And what they're doing, and what this one is doing, is he's putting his thumb between his index and his middle finger. Okay, and his thumb sticking out. So what that is like the 15th century, the 16th century, the version of flipping you off. Okay, he's literally giving the Pope the middle finger. It's just a bit of his revenge to Julius II to say, you're gonna make me do this. I don't want to do this, so I'm forever gonna be flipping you off. Okay, so here's the layout of the Sistine Chapel. Okay. Now here is they want us to take a look at the Delphic Sibyl, right? Now, Michelangelo works from male models. He actually works from live humans that he is modeling. He paints like he is sculpting marble. So if you look at the drapery of the Sibyl, you can see how it looks more like it's made out of stone than it is actual soft billowy fabric. Okay, and her hair, he paints these very, very, very solid looking figures, these very idealized with these very crisp lines. Okay, now check out her arms. Her arms are enormous. They are huge because, again, he's working from male models, even for the females. So they're all going to have this very masculine appearance and this great strength to them because he's working from male figures. So the Delphic Sibyl is the prophetess of Delphi, the prophetess of Apollo, okay, in Delphi, who they construed her writings, some writings And again, there are multiple Sibyls throughout, multiple Delphic oracles throughout the years, but he, at one of them at one point, creates these writings that can be construed as foretellings of Jesus, and so that's why she gets included here. We're seeing again those sculptural elements that he paints. She's sitting in this chair, so good, with the Inuti acting as columns holding up the architecture that isn't really there. It's so remarkable. Okay, the joke is again that all of his women look like men because they were originally men, and just with the important elements added onto it. So again, she's got this sculptural weight, and she looks like she's made out of stone rather than muscle. Okay, and she is idealized. Now, the other part that they want us to see is the flood. So here is Noah's Ark. So you can see this is one of the first. Let me go back real quickly. The flood is back here. Is one of the first things he paints. So he's still ambitious at this point. He's not burnt out yet, because when we get down here, he paints again. They're a lot more simplified, and he paints a lot quicker with a lot fewer figures in it. Whereas the flood, he's still ambitious, and he still hasn't burnt out yet. And so he's still painting like there's 60 figures in this one panel with the ark. So here's Noah's family on the ark. People are fleeing to high ground, trying to not die by the flood. All right. You can see again that musculature, that weight, that sculpted heaviness of these figures, that power, like all of them are, and the idealized, they're superhuman. Even the old woman right here, she's like just superhuman in her strength and in her form. And it's so funny that we have a picture in our brains in 21st century America what the ark looks like, and it isn't this. And it's just funny how that depiction has changed through the years. All right. And here's the creation of Adam. Now, the creation of Adam, again, AP knows that we'll take a look at it, so they haven't included it as a thing that they wanted us to highlight, but we're going to talk about it just briefly anyway. Again, the hand gesture is important. This is iconic. This has become one of the most important symbols here in Western art. And you see God swooping in. And the thing about Michelangelo, is that he paints God as a human. So there, again, that humanism, where he depicts God as a human. He's swooping in here with his drapery billowing behind him, and it is filled with cherubs, and he's being carried by Inuti and cherubs, and then his arm as extends and gives life to his creation, which is Adam. This great musculature of Adam, this great sculpted body out of marble. Now, the figure under his arm is the unyet created Eve. So there's Eve. She's not yet been made in flesh, but she's made in spirit, and she watches on. And the great thing about the billowing drapery of God is that it makes a human brain. It's the exact shape of a brain in cross-section. Like God is the great brain of the universe, which is really, really, really cool. And he also uses the golden section multiple times throughout the Sistine Chapel. So again, they are paying attention to these things. These compositions are not haphazard. This is not slapped together. This is very, very thought out and very planned and very organized. Okay. Now, the Last Judgment, he paints as an old man. He paints many, many, many years later, commissioned by a later pope, because Julius II dies. And he paints this at the later pope's behest. And he gives us this great scene. And compare it to Giotto's. Okay, Giotto's was very, very powerful and very cool. But this one has all the power and emotional weight that you would expect from Michelangelo, where you have the souls of the saved swooping in, angels carrying the cross, the prophets, and the apostles looking on. And you can tell the apostles, they're carrying instruments that include us, that let us know who they are. So for example, so here's Christ, and he shows us Christ without a beard, because Christ could be depicted without a beard even into the Renaissance. Okay, and here's Mary, and she's turning away from his wrath. We get this very, again, it's an emotional, but it's a calm. Like, it's meant to be emotional in the fact that he's serving up justice here, but Mary turns away. But there's no like anger in his face. Okay. We see here, this guy here, these are keys. So we know that this is St. Peter. And this guy down here is Bartholomew. And Bartholomew was flayed alive. Okay, so he's holding the knife that was used to flay, which means his skin was peeled off while he was alive. And he's holding the knife that was used to flay him, as well as his own skin. Okay, his own flayed flesh. Now, the face of the flesh of Bartholomew here is a self-portrait of Michelangelo. We have the angels calling the dead to rise, the damned. So the dead, the righteous dead, are being brought out of their graves, resurrected, and the damned are being sent off to torment. There's St. Catherine with her wheel, St. Sebastian. So good. All right. Compositionally, very, very similar to all the other Last Judgments that we've seen. I mean, this is just kind of the format that they took. This is what it looked like. This is how you painted a Last Judgment, but so much more believable and so much more dynamic. Okay. Now, our last piece that person that we're going to be talking about is Raphael. And Raphael was and this painting of him doesn't really give the sense of who he is. And who he is DaVinci was the distracted scientist, and Michelangelo was the grumpy old guy who didn't like anyone, and no one liked him because he was so cantankerous. Raphael was the guy that everyone loved. He was handsome, he was charming, he was funny. You wanted Raphael at your party. Okay, he's much like Richard Madden here. So imagine Richard Madden when we talk about Raphael. Now, you've seen these guys before, the cherubs. You've seen these before. This is Raphael, and that's small part of a much bigger painting. Raphael is going to be influenced by the older gentlemen that come before him. And so he's going to paint the Madonna. He's going to paint Mary again and again and again. And that's kind of his calling card. That's what he's known for, is painting these very, very beautiful Madonnas. So he paints Madonna here. This is called the Sistine Madonna. And he paints her holding this darling Christ child, and she is so beautiful. But you can see that influence of Michelangelo. You can see that kind of sculpty influence, but you can also see the influence of Leonardo with the chiaroscuro and the sfumato. Okay, and those little cherubs this is the part that you know, but they're just taken from this much bigger picture. Now, the Raphael that is on our list is the School of Athens, and you may have heard of or seen this before. Now, this piece down here in the corner is a doorway, and it gets blocked out sometimes, but it's a doorway here in the Pope's library. So this was done, he was commissioned to paint the four walls in the library of for the Pope, and so the Pope's private apartment, and this is just adjacent to the Sistine Chapel. Okay, now Michelangelo famously did not want anyone to watch. He did not want anyone to see. He even chased the Pope out while he was working. He chased the Pope out of the Sistine Chapel. Said, "You can't be in here," and he was chucking things down from the scaffolding to get the Pope to leave because he's like, "You can't watch me. Gross." Raphael, it said, while he was painting, he's like, "I gotta see this," and so he sneaks in and takes a peek. We're going to get back to that here in just a second. So the School of Athens is perhaps the most quintessential Renaissance picture in that what he does here is he paints all of the Western philosophers that have come before, that have written about anything, everything, math, science, everything, history, all of it, philosophy. And he uses what he's picked up from DaVinci, that great linear perspective and all the converging lines here. And he creates this mythical space here. Here's Athena and here's Apollo. And he divides the world between Plato. Let me zoom in here. Between Plato and Aristotle. All right. He divides the world between the two of them. And so the philosophers that have a more Aristotelian feel are on this side of Aristotle, and those that are more Platonic are over here. And so he's going to have these two guys be mirror opposites of each other. So they're going to be red and purple and blue and yellow. So again, they're meant to like reflect the different elements, and they're holding the books that they wrote, the Timaeus and the other books that they wrote. And so it's like fire and air and earth and water. You know, the four elements are represented in them, but they're like contrasting with each other. And Plato points up because he's thinking about the idealized world, and Aristotle points down and he's thinking about the observable world. So we've got the idealized forms versus the what you can see around you, the emotional world. And it's just so good. Now the structure that they are all standing in, again, is a false structure. It doesn't exist in reality, but it's based off of the plans. Bramante is going to be building a new St. Peter's Basilica. Julius II is the guy who's going to say St. Peter's is gross and we need to tear this thing down because we're the centerpiece of the Catholic Church and we need a big of the whole of Christianity, and we need a great new big church to reflect that. And the old St. Peter's is 1,000 years old and it's falling apart. So we need a new one. So Bramante here is going to show us, he's going to create the plan for this. So what we're getting here is Bramante's plan. I mean, he's included pagan statues here, but the floor plan is Bramante's new St. Peter's Basilica. Now, what he's going to do is he's going to populate, kind of like Dante does with the Divine Comedy. Raphael is going to populate the School of Athens, all the philosophers, with these people that he knows. All right. So hopefully Plato looks familiar in that it is Leonardo da Vinci. Okay. And this guy right here, this is Bramante. And this guy right here is his own self-portrait. It's Raphael. And this figure was originally not included in the composition. But after Raphael sneaks into the Sistine Chapel and takes a peek and is like, oh, yeah, I got to include Michelangelo. He's a bonehead, but I got to include him. So this is a portrait of Michelangelo. All right. Now, Again, this was one of 4 paintings. So this is philosophy in the Pope's library. Law, poetry, and theology are the other 3. And here they are. So here's the School of Athens. So you can see how big it is. It is a big picture. And it doesn't look that big when we were just seeing it, but it is a big picture. So you can see some of these other paintings. So here is theology on the opposite wall from the School of Athens. So you're getting kind of the same thing with all the prophets and the popes and the great theologians of the past, as the poets are also getting depicted, as well as the lawyers. Okay. The lawgivers. So good. Just having Christ enthroned with Mary and John the Baptist enthroned with the 12 apostles. So good. Here's poetry. All right. Now, there have been extensive studies to determine who is who and which philosopher is which. And like number 5 is a Muslim mathematician that he includes. So yeah, just really, really great. Very, very cool. And you can take whole courses on this one painting. It's really quite remarkable what he includes in this picture. Okay. So this was originally, again, called philosophy, and we call it today the School of Athens, and it was designed to be for the Pope's library. All right. And that's where we're going to end for today. And we will pick up with the rest of the High Renaissance next time.